George Janko and Logan Paul seem to have more issues every single day. And with George coming out with his most recent podcast, Talking with Mike, he exposed some things that were happening behind the scenes with him and Impulsive, along with him and Logan specifically. Now, in today's video, we're actually going to dive into Logan Paul's response to all of these claims that George Janko made on his most recent podcast, seeing if he can kind of clear the air, because watching that podcast, it only looked worse and worse for Logan. But seeing Logan's response and the proof kind of turns the table in some people's opinion. Now, with this, we're going to watch this first clip where George is talking about how he made no money on Impulsive.
My own show, because we're not making money on this show, and I'm getting pushed out.
You made money on the show.
I can show you my books. I was spending 10 G's a month being on the show.
All right, let's talk about this. Obviously, I wasn't on the podcast to represent myself, so I'd like to clarify a few things that were said. As well as having his own credit card, all expenses related to the show were paid for, including all travel and lodging. Obviously, George's total reimbursement came out to $20,000, 317 cents. I'd love to see any books that show otherwise. Spending $120,000 a year to be on a show is a little confusing.
This is a guy who's sending us screenshots of $11 million a week that he's making.
Statement.
We see here George saying, hey, listen, I can show you my books. I was spending 10 grand a month being on that show. I got paid only 5,000 a month being on that show. Impulsive wasn't making the money. Logan, in fact, was kind of bragging and sending us shots of 11 million he was making per week. So George made it seem like, man, just being on that show, he wasn't getting anything. Well, then we see Logan pull up the records and say he made over $300,000 working on Impulsive for only 15 months. That's mind-boggling. So for the 15 months that he was working on Impulsive with Logan and Mike, he racked in over $300,000. And all things related to the show were paid for because he had a Impulsive credit card. So it seems like George actually made more money than what he's making it seem like. And then even Mike gives a number and they bleep it out on George's podcast, and George says, well, I don't like talking about money. And if he genuinely paid you that much money, there's nothing to complain about. If you're paying, more money because you're trying to do your own thing on your own end, well, that's on you. That has nothing to do with Impulsive. He then goes on and talks about here how nobody checked in on him after he got fired from Impulsive.
Not you, not Caleb, not Kevin, not Dylan. Nobody fucking called me when I got fired.
George did not get fired. He quit. I'll touch on that in a second. But after he quit, I called him frequently. I reached out. I wanted to reconcile the friendship. I invited him to my birthday party and WrestleMania and even my ranch a few weeks later. He chose not to come. He also unfollowed all the people he mentioned on Instagram, which is maybe why they didn't call him. I don't know. I can't speak for them, but he still does not follow them to this day.
So we see here that George is saying, hey, after I got fired, nobody checked on me. Not you, Mike, not Logan, not this person, this person, this person. So he names up all these people. And then Logan ends up saying, hey, listen, I did reach out. Here's my receipts. Here's my proof of me reaching out and texting him and giving some calls to him. And the fact that the other people that he's talking about didn't reach out is probably because he unfollowed them right after he left Impulsive. Now in this next clip, he's going to talk about the 3 episodes that they filmed without George when George was away for his birthday and how he was upset about that.
And then on my birthday, you guys shot 3 episodes, so I couldn't show up.
The 2 episodes he's talking about, not 3, were shot 4 days after George's birthday. His birthday's on January 3rd. We shot those episodes on January 7th. We were already in Vegas signing the UFC to Prime, and as we do, want to capitalize on the location and our use of time and energy and the guests in that city. George didn't come to work because he wanted to spend time with his family for his belated birthday, which I totally understand and we even praised.
One of the things that I love about George, he prioritizes his family and friends over anything.
So George seemed to be upset because they filmed 3 episodes while he was away for his birthday, but Logan cleared it up. It was only 2 episodes, and we filmed those days after his birthday, but George decided to go and spend time with family. Now, he's not knocking him for that, but it seems like George was like making it seem as if they just purposely just went and filmed without him and didn't care about him. But it actually looks like George wanted to go spend time with family, but they just wanted to capitalize on the location and place that they were at the time. And it just so happened, hey, George, you're going to be missed out on this one. In this next clip, we're going to actually see George talk about his personal relationship with Logan while transitioning to his own podcast and the issues that arise from that.
I got my show going, and then not only was I controlled and pushed around on Impulsive, but then Logan's making calls and directing my show. He told me that I couldn't take Celsius.
So this is the big one. Making calls, trying to make it seem like I wanted to control his show is absolutely ridiculous. As you can see right here, I was like, hey, we got to get you Prime because I saw him drinking our competitor, and he told me to call him. He was filming my reaction to tell me he took a deal with a competitor. I told him, please don't film. Like, I'd like to talk about this. I hope you're joking, by the way. The truth is, I thought it was a bad look that my best friend and co-host took a brand deal with our competitor without consulting me, asking me, giving us even a chance to match it before he signed the deal, because the audience that he's building, at least at the time, on his own podcast was being funneled directly from the podcast that I was building with him. I said, hey dude, I understand you need to make money. The entire text is right here that I sent him after our conversation, because I did understand his position if he needed to make money, but I thought it was also a little odd because he did make $317,000 in 15 months. Regardless, I did tell him I can't have him on Impulsive if he's going to take the deal with the competitor, but if after he makes the money he wants to come back to the podcast, he's more than...
This one's different. I mean, hey, listen, Logan has George on his podcast. That's one of his coworkers, and then George wants to go and do a deal with Celsius, which is a competitor against Prime. So yeah, there's going to be issues there. There's going to be concerns there, especially being in a business model. It seems like they just didn't communicate correctly. It seems like George just kind of jumped at this opportunity. I don't know what was hidden underneath, if they had conversations prior, but it seems like George was offered a deal at Celsius and decided to take it for his own podcast. But that was hard for Logan because, again, it's his competitor. It makes it awkward for business. It is a business decision. Last thing that George brought up that Logan wanted to address was George telling Mike that he's not going to grow being on Impulsive and that there's nothing for him there.
Grow. They won't let you grow. They
see here, George is telling Mike, hey, listen, you will not grow still being on Impulsive. If you're going to stay on Impulsive, you're not going to grow. Obviously, Logan has different opinions on that because he's saying, hey, listen, I'm okay with people growing. I encouraged George to go and do his own podcast. I was giving him praises about it. I've helped Mike with getting the book out and growing his YouTube channel, etc. So it seems like Logan's saying, hey, listen, no, I'm okay with people growing and doing their own thing and just kind of building from that. He's not against that, but apparently, and it seems like George thinks otherwise. Now, guys, what do we do with all of this? How do we handle this situation? What do we do going forward? To be honest with you, I mean, this is a bunch of he said, she said. You know, this is just a messy situation. Now, I will say this, Logan did provide evidence. Logan did provide receipts while George just talked about it. And there was no evidence. There was no receipts. Honestly, I think these two need to sit down and have a private conversation, flesh out all their stuff. They don't need to go on a podcast and make it about all that. They just need to sit down and talk and have a conversation and just flesh out their issues with one another and have more clarity. Because this is messy. This is gross. This is like two high school boys arguing. And this is just silly. But we do need to be praying for both of them. I still have my issues with George being a professing Christian and participating and indulging in certain sins that he's yet to just kind of fully repent of and turn from. And then, of course, Logan, you know, he's been, professing Christian at one point, then he's atheist, and he's just kind of all over the map. And he has no interest in following the Lord. But maybe, hopefully, one day he would. You know, if the Lord still saves and opens up blind eyes and deaf ears. So let's just be praying for both these guys. Let's be praying that their friendship can be mended because they've been friends for years. But let's be praying, most importantly, that they would surrender their lives to Christ and that their lives would be radically changed by what Christ did on the cross for them and for all of humanity. Real quick, guys, if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing to the BTteam Ministry YouTube channel, as well as like this video and leave a comment down below. Would love to know your thoughts about all of this. I know it's messy and it's a weird situation, but would still love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this video, you might like this one over here.